weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The case of Alex Shea at Brown University. Shea was the Brown undergrad who essentially doged Brown University administrators, not in terms of deciding what would be cut, but by asking questions like Elon Musk and the Doge boys were asking of federal bureaucrats. What do you do? What did you accomplish this week in furtherance for what you allegedly do? Those sorts of questions. And he was whistled before the inquisitors at Brown, disciplined for his impudent behavior. Well, that has been reversed. Interesting. There's a new sheriff in town, and he is none too pleased with the performance of Ivy League schools, or the elite schools, generally speaking, on a range of matters, including the high-handed approach to the public, to the student body that so many have taken. She joined Fox News to detail this reversal of fortune on campus.
Yeah, so prices at the Ivy League are just skyrocketing like crazy. At Brown, it's going to be $93,000 a year next year.
What?
And part of the reason why costs are growing so drastically across the board is because of the number of administrators. Now, I'm not talking about the professors here that teach your classes. I'm talking about people that sit at a desk in some administrative building, and they write memos, and they fill out spreadsheets. And there's 3,800 of them at Brown. And that's just insane. Since we're a small school, we've only got about 7,000 undergrads. And so I emailed all of them to the email you mentioned to ask them what happened. And I guess when you investigate the administration investigates you back. A bunch of deans teamed up to charge me with various things from emotional harm to violating the technology policy. And they just threw the entire rule book at me. But I mean, like you said, I was cleared earlier this week. They determined that I hadn't done anything wrong. And I think it's pretty clear this was retaliation against me because they didn't like my reporting.
No question about it, because he reports for the on-campus paper, the conservative alternative, I think, to the daily student paper on campus there at Brown. I love the sort of Yakov-Smirnoff construction there. When you investigate the university investigates you. Exactly. And what happened when he sent this request out, through the email list of all the administrators? He actually said some responded, and some responded actually quite constructively. I mean, there's some responsible people on these campuses that are serious about their jobs, but not most.
Brown told people not to respond. And most of the communication that we got back was hostile. Like this dean charged not only me, but the entire board of my newspaper, the Brown Spectator. Do you know why? Because she said that naming ourselves the Brown Spectator is a trademark violation, even though there are a bunch of other student newspapers too that use the word Brown in their name. So it's pretty clear that this is just very flimsy. And they're covering up their antitrust violations. Congress is investigating Brown and the rest of the Ivy League now for price fixing and other violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act. I think it's pretty clear that there's something fishy going on here. They're trying to silence people who are exposing it.
It's been going on for a long time, actually. It's funny he mentioned they tried to disallow the students from using Brown in the name of the student paper, the Brown Spectator. That happened to me at Northwestern when I was part of a group that started a independent alternative to the Daily Northwestern on campus. And when we ran afoul of, the vaunted student government and the general political culture on campus, that's the same thing that they attempt to do. You can't use the Northwestern name. And we actually had a pretty pitched battle over it, and we were ultimately successful, and thanks in part to what surprisingly was actually an enlightened university president at the time named Arnie Weber. We don't have such things at Northwestern these days, or most places don't. But this is what they do. This is what they've been doing for 30 years, which is why about, 5 or 6 years ago, Andrew Sullivan said we all live on one big college campus now? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if culture is incubating through elite institutions, then we should pay attention to those elite institutions. And the Trump administration certainly is, and I'm glad. Something else, just another example of this. When Noah Worksman began his first final exam in law school, the classroom was half empty. There were maybe 60 or 70 people in our cohort, he said, but at least 30 were missing. This was at Pepperdine's Caruso School of Law in Malibu. It was what we call a racehorse exam, he says at the final. Pretty guaranteed you're not going to finish, but you have to move as fast as possible and rack up as many points as you can. He later learned that the absent students weren't running late. They would be completing the exam separately using extended time, a testing accommodation that the Americans with Disability Act requires schools to make available for students with conditions that impair major life activities such as learning, reading, concentrating. So you get like 1.5 times the amount of time to complete these exams. More than a third of the school's law students received testing accommodations, the most common of which is extended time. There's a piece in the Journal by Jillian Edelman, who's the Joseph Rago fellow there. Law schools don't disclose their rates of accommodation, but a 2023 Oregon Law Review paper reports data on public law schools obtained through state public records laws. As of 21, before the post-COVID rise in disability accommodations, the accommodation rates were 21% at University of California, Hastings, 25% at UC Irvine. Private law schools like Pepperdine aren't subject to them. The Law School Admissions Council reports that only 12% of first-year law students nationwide had a mental or physical disability, according to them, suggesting that many of the students who don't need accommodations are using them to get a leg up. Oh, you don't say. The California bar exams accommodations rate, by contrast, is around 7%. So the bar exam accommodations, 7% require and get. But at these law schools, it's 21 and 25 and 33. It's a scam. It's like, your support animals on airplanes. It's a scam because I just want my dog to be with me on the plane.
Okay, easy.
I mean, that's what it is. But what happened to this Noah Worksman kid for raising this issue? He was summoned to a meeting with Pepperdine's assistant dean.
Oh, my gosh.
Quote, he tells me that there are allegations against me that I've been bullying specially accommodated students and I've been stalking and harassing them outside the classrooms. I'm creating a hostile environment for them on campus, and that if my behavior were to continue, the hammer would come down on me. He didn't do anything. He just wrote a petition saying there's a scam going on and we should do something about it. The people aren't participating in the scam. And if you disagree, then don't sign the petition. This is the culture on campus.
Nothing has changed.
Dan Henninger is a writer for the Wall Street Journal editorial page. He joins us now. Dan, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Dan.
I mean, this is why, it's stories like this, the Alex Shea story out of Brown, the story that your colleague wrote about at the Journal about Pepperdine Law, and so many more over so many years, why at least people like me are so delighted by the attitude the Trump administration is taking to higher ed. It's, to me, so much of this, almost all of it, is long overdue.
It's long overdue. And what has been happening during that period of long overdueness, as the student at Brown made clear, is the cost of going to these places just keeps going up. I mean, that's mind-boggling. Brown, $93,000, basically $100,000 a year. Off the top to attend a university, and then what is coming out of it? At Pepperdine, would you want to hire any of those lawyers who are scamming the system the way you described it? That'd be a wonderful representation to have. The problem fundamentally, and it goes back many years, is that there's no real oversight of these institutions, of these universities. He described 3,000 administrators working in a school for 7,000 students.
Yeah.
I can remember years ago, Dan, I used to get Harvard's own, the university's weekly newspaper. And it's a big, fat tabloid about the university. The most fascinating aspect of the Harvard newspaper was the last 10 or so pages, which was a tiny type advertising jobs around Harvard. And there were thousands of them. Harvard has all of these institutes. They were jobs not just for administrators, but for people to clean up the buildings. And it was clear that Harvard had this tremendous labor force that had expanded because Harvard had been able to expand itself without any limitation or oversight. My newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, has stories virtually every day of a CEO at a company who has been fired by the board of directors for lack of performance, right? But the trustees at these universities hardly ever fire the university president, hardly ever try to measure any performance other than putting up lots of new buildings with some of the trustees' names on them. So, yeah, the new sheriff in town is long overdue in trying to bring some Doge-like efficiency to the American university system.
Well, and also like hold them to substantive performance standards too. I mean, the announcement that according to the administration, DOJ, that Columbia no longer meets accreditation standards. I mean, they're coming after. They say, they're coming. Alan Garber says they're coming after Harvard and the university presidents, other university presidents saying the same thing. You're damn right we are, but we're doing so from a substantive place. We're not coming after you just to come after you. We're coming after you because of all these bad acts, many of which you concede, like suborning anti-Semitism on campus.
Yeah, and accreditation is the Achilles heel of these universities. That terrifies them. They can't function without accreditation. A lot of the other things that Trump is doing are ending up in court. But the accreditation initiative against Columbia is a very big deal because they do have to comply with a set of rules. And if it can be established that they're not, a case can be made that their accreditation should be suspended.
Now, yesterday, President Trump instructed the White House counsel and Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate whether top aides during Biden's presidency, quote unquote, conspired to deceive the public about his mental fitness. And I was wondering, do you think that is just a distraction from other things that are going on, or is this needed? And should President Trump just move on?
That's a good question, Amy. It's not as though at this point no one realized that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent. Nonetheless, this is a huge event. He probably was mentally incompetent to a great degree through the 4 years of his presidency, almost historically unprecedented. Maybe Woodrow Wilson, who was incapacitated for the last year and a half or so of his presidency, with the presidency being run by his wife and his doctor. We never knew through those years who was operating the presidency. We certainly knew in foreign policy that Jake Sullivan and the Secretary of State were doing. But domestically, we had no idea what was going on inside that White House, who was making decisions, and on what basis they were making those decisions. I would welcome congressional hearings on this. Usually they are something of a farce and theater, but I think those individuals should be put in front of the public and asked to account for themselves during that period, because this was an unbelievable precedent. This is the United States of America, and to have a president who is so disabled as Joe Biden obviously was, running a country this powerful was frightening.
Yeah, and I know those hearings, people roll their eyes, a hearing in lieu of actually doing anything. But, sometimes you have a hearing and those that are whistled before the committee to explain themselves destroy themselves, like we saw Ivy League university presidents do. So, there is some utility to those hearings sometimes.
And it's fascinating that Jean-Karine Pierre, Biden's press secretary, is now declaring herself an independent, dropping out of the Democratic Party, and has written something of a tell-all book. She went out there, either was forced to go out there or willingly went out there and lied day after day after day. Certainly, she could have resigned at any time if she was that upset about it. Mm-hmm. Be that as it may, I look forward to her book, because perhaps we'll get some idea of exactly who was pulling the strings and making the American public forcing the American public to believe the unbelievable during the last 2 Biden years.
Well, it'll be interesting because I think from what she said since November of last year, she's gone exactly the other way. That why she's leaving, becoming an independent, quote unquote, is because she was so horrified by what she called the firing squad at actually a symposium at Harvard. She called the firing squad that assembled around Joe Biden, and she never seen anything like it, and she was so disappointed by it, and so on and so forth. It sounds like she's sticking to her script because she knows that, well, or she doesn't know, but she apparently thinks that going the Jake Tapper route is not the route to go. It'll be interesting, though. I don't know.
Did you pre-order the book, sir?
I have not. Well, yes,
or both of you, gentlemen.
I would not go that far.
Dan,
well, I mean,
Dan, you know what? How about we split a copy? I don't want to.
You read the first half
and full freight on that. I did want to get your view on sort of the BBB and. You know, I don't know. I'm a little bit exhausted, sort of sawing sawdust on this with the big spenders versus the Rand Pauls and the Ron Johnsons. But I do like this. I do like what Mike Lee posted the other day, which is he's taking up Warren Buffett's idea. I'm drafting a constitutional amendment to oust every member of Congress whenever inflation exceeds 3%. It's better to disqualify politicians than for an entire nation to suffer under the yoke of inflation. Let me know what you think. So whenever inflation hits 3%, if this constitutional amendment were ratified, then we just get rid of everybody in both chambers and start over. There are worse ideas I've heard.
There are worse ideas. There's also, asking the Fed to run inflation policy according to a gold standard or something like the Taylor rule, which we don't need to get into, but a rule that nonetheless requires them to keep inflation below 3%. The big, beautiful bill, I think the debt and the deficit have just run like this forever and ever, and it's one of these, as we know, famously called eyes glaze over issues, and the public just lets it wash over them. I don't think that's true anymore, Dan. I think the public is upset about the fact that the debt is well over $30 trillion and the deficit is rising like this. It's a political issue. The immediate problem with this bill is that if they don't pass something, the American people are going to experience a massive tax increase at the end of the year when the 2017 tax cuts expire. And that itself is going to do immediate significant damage to the economy. So they do have to find a way to get the big, beautiful tax cut through by the end of the year. And it's probably going to include some spending. But the pushback from Senator Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, and the rest, it's a very good thing.
Daniel Henninger is a writer for the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Dan, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you guys.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The following advertisement includes a celebrity impersonation.
The summer heat in Chicagoland is no joke. And if your old air conditioner is making funny noises, you may already know it's time for a new unit.
Look, your air conditioner, it's a disaster. People are telling me it's the worst ever.
Don't sweat it.